GI system. तो मेरे को डिस्टर्ब कर रहे प्लीज. So to understand the structure of gastrointestinal system is the first aim or overview of this class. After that, we'll talk about the various controls of who controls this gastrointestinal system, that is nervous control, endocrine control, local sympathetic and parasympathetic control. We'll discuss. Then in the end, we'll end our chapter with understanding the motility. So structure, then control, then the motility, that is movement or constriction of the gastrointestinal tract. So to further understand this, we have the structure is as follows. So we have got the innermost lining epithelium like this. So this is the innermost lining epithelium of the gastrointestinal tract. This innermost lining epithelium is made up of the innermost lining epithelium. So you call it mucosa. Mucosa again divided into parts like the epithelium, which is basically the columnar epithelium. Then we have got lamina propria. Then we have got the lamina propria. Then we have got the muscularis. So these are the muscle fibers, right? These are the muscle fibers. Next layer is the submucosa. Next layer is the submucosa. Next layer is the muscle layer. So we have got two important muscle layers here. The muscle layer in the mucosa, we call it as muscularis. The muscle layer outside the submucosa, we are still calling it as muscularis. So to differentiate these two, one is muscularis interna and another is muscularis externa. And I hope it's very easy for you to label which is interna and which is externa. Externa is external. So we have got muscularis externa. All right. Then outside this muscularis externa, we have got a thick connective tissue layer. And this you are calling it as a serosa. This you are calling it as a serosa or a serosa. So the mucosa is made up of three important layers: the epithelium, the lamina propria, and the muscularis interna. The epithelium is made up of single columnar cells, specialized cells, single layer, which help in secretion. and they release some hormones. So what is the function of this epithelium? The function of this epithelium is to secrete hormones, and also it helps in secretion of certain substances. Next, the lamina propria, which is serving as a layer of connective tissue. So wherever you have connective tissue, the function of this connective tissue is to give a firm structure or strength to the overlying cells or layer of cells. This lamina propria contains glands. This lamina propria contains glands. This lamina propria contains cells which secrete hormones. This lamina propria is a house or a seat of lymph nodes. This lamina propria has got capillaries or blood vessels. So this lamina propria is rich in the glands, hormone secreting cells, lymph nodes, and the capillaries. Next comes the muscularis interna or muscularis mucosa. The muscularis mucosa is a thin layer of muscle which contracts. Its contraction is responsible, which causes folds, the contraction causes folds in the mucosa. Its contraction causes folds and rugae in the mucosa. And these folds are important so that the surface area of absorption is increased. Next comes the submucosa. The submucosa is another layer of connective tissue. And submucosa, again, wherever we have connective tissue, we have glands and blood vessels. So here again we have the submucosa has glands and has blood vessels. It has glands and it has got large blood vessels. It has got lymphatics. Right. Next comes the muscularis externa. The muscularis externa is composed of the circular muscles and longitudinal muscles. There are two types of muscles in the muscularis externa. We have got circularis muscle and longitudinal muscles. So circular muscles are inner and longitudinal muscles are outer. This is throughout the GI tract. This chronology is maintained. Throughout the gastrointestinal tract, this chronology is perfectly maintained. The circular muscles are inner and the longitudinal muscles are the outer layer of the muscle. There is a plexus of nerves which is involved in motor activity or movement of these muscle fibers, and it is present in between these two layers. The nerve plexus called as myenteric nerve plexus. The nerve plexus, which is called as myenteric nerve plexus, is present in between these two layers of the muscularis externa. The outermost layer is serosa, and this is the outermost layer of entire gastrointestinal tract. It again consists of epithelial cells, connective tissue. It is lined by a layer of autonomic nerve fibers. It is lined by a layer of autonomic nerve fibers which connect with the nerve plexus or enteric nerve plexus and helps in bringing about the neuronal response, nerve response. So with this, I hope you have understood. We have got four important layers: the mucosa, the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. All right. So we have completed one part, the first part of today's lecture. Next part of today's lecture is the control. First we'll talk about the nervous control. Then we'll talk about the hormonal control. It's very simple. The nervous control is brought about by sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. What happens in GI tract is, the gastrointestinal tract consists of a vast network of nerve fibers. Very, very big, very, very large network of nerve fibers. We call it enteric nervous system. The enteric nervous system consists of the myenteric plexus and the Meissner's plexus. So what are the two important types of enteric nervous system? The Meissner's nerve plexus and the myenteric. Myo means muscle, enteric means of the intestine. Myenteric nerve plexus and the Meissner's nerve plexus. Plural we call it plexi. So the myenteric and the Meissner's nerve plexi. In a normal GI tract, the function is dependent on this neural network. The enteric nervous system, it is innervated by the autonomic nervous system, and hence it serves as a final mediator for all the neuronal activity of the enteric nervous system. So it is innervated by the autonomic nervous system. We all know that autonomic nervous system consists of two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic and parasympathetic. All right. So how is the sympathetic nervous system acting upon? The sympathetic nervous system acts upon the gastrointestinal tract with the help of norepinephrine, whereas parasympathetic acts upon with the help of acetylcholine and other neurotransmitters we'll discuss. So stimulation of sympathetic nervous system in the intestine, it results in decrease in motility. It results in decrease in secretions. So whenever sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, it reduces the GI motility, it reduces the secretion, it increases the constriction of sphincters. So you tend to hold urine, you tend to hold the fecal matter, you don't tend to pass it if it is sympathetic overstimulation. All right, as occurs when once, say for example, you are into the forest and you saw a tiger. All right, your sympathetic nervous system is activated and you run from there, or you fight with it, or you fright. So this fight, fright, or flight, or running away is a complex interplay between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So stimulation of sympathetic nervous system occurs, a lot of anxiety, and then it causes constriction of the sphincters. This is because of release of norepinephrine into the synapses of the myenteric and the Meissner's nerve plexus. All right. So overall, if you see the sympathetic nervous system, is it slowing the activity of GI tract or is it fastening the activity of GI tract? It is slowing the activity of the GI tract. It is slowing the activity of GI tract. Now what happens to parasympathetic nervous system? Parasympathetic nervous system involves acetylcholine neurotransmitter. Acetylcholine neurotransmitter increases the motility. Acetylcholine neurotransmitter increases the motility. Acetylcholine neurotransmitter increases the secretions. It increases the motility, increases secretions. The other neurotransmitters like vasoactive intestinal peptide. The vasoactive intestinal peptide results in it causes relaxation of sphincters or decreases the constriction of sphincters. It reduces the sphincter constriction. We have got one more important neurotransmitter called as gastrin releasing peptide. Gastrin releasing peptide. All right, this is also under the influence of parasympathetic nervous system. So this vasoactive intestinal peptide is released from where? Vasoactive intestinal peptide is released from the enteric neurons present in the enteric plexus, whereas the gastrin releasing peptide, it stimulates the release of gastrin from the G cells. So what does GRP do? It stimulates release of gastrin from where? From the G cells of the intestine. So what does it do? It increases the gastrin secretion from the G cells. All right. Now, through the enteric nervous system, there is increase in parasympathetic activity. Whenever there is increase in parasympathetic activity, it increases the digestive processes. It fastens the digestive processes by constriction of the muscles, increasing motility. It decreases the constriction of the sphincter. Hence, what happens if the gastrointestinal tract is constricting and the sphincters are open? If the sphincters are open and gastrointestinal tract is constricted, defecation occurs. So parasympathetic response causes defecation, whereas sympathetic response holds the defecation. It prevents the defecation. This point you need to understand. This is all about the nervous control. Next, we'll talk about the endocrine control. All right. So the endocrine control of the gastrointestinal tract, we should understand what is the source, what is the stimulus, and how does it affect the stomach motility, how does it affect the pancreas motility, and what will happen to the gallbladder. All these, let us see. So there are various hormones which are acting upon on the GI tract. Now this concept I'll also discuss in endocrinology again, but for now we limit our discussion to the types of hormones which are present in the GI tract. First is the secretin. Next is the cholecystokinin. Next comes the gastrin. Next comes the gastrin. Next comes the gastric inhibitory peptide. Next comes the glucagon-like peptide. All right. So let us try to understand what is the source of each of these. The secretin is released from the duodenum. The secretin is released from the duodenum. From the S cells of the duodenum. S stands for secretin cells. From the S cells of the duodenum. And how is it secreted? Whenever gastric acid enters the duodenum. So acid entering the duodenum Whenever acid enters the duodenum, it releases secretin. Secretin causes inhibition on two things. Secretin causes inhibition on motility. The motility is reduced and secretion is also reduced. Just like what? Just like the, yes, sympathetic or parasympathetic? Sympathetic nervous system. The motility is reduced and the secretion is also reduced. So it inhibits motility and secretion. What is its action on the pancreas? On the pancreas, the secretin, it's a very, very important point. On the pancreas, it stimulates the pancreatic fluid secretion. It stimulates the bicarbonate rich pancreatic secretion. Bicarbonate rich secretions from the pancreas. From the pancreas. All right. It's a very, very important point. Please remember. So the name itself, secretin, means it is increasing the pancreatic secretions, but it inhibits the gastric and stomach secretions. Please remember. Secretin decreases the stomach secretions, but it enhances the pancreatic or the gastric secretion. This point you will have to please remember. Next, we'll discuss the cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin also released by the duodenum. The lining cells of the duodenum. The lining cells of the duodenum secrete cholecystokinin. What is the stimulus of cholecystokinin? Fat. So you have a fat-rich diet and cholecystokinin is stimulated. You have amino acids, that is protein-rich diet entering into the duodenum. If fat and protein-rich diet entering into the duodenum, that is the stimulus of secretion of cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin. All right. So this cholecystokinin, it increases the gastric emptying, or it inhibits the gastric emptying. So somebody who has got increased secretion of cholecystokinin will feel bloating. His GI motility is slower down. It is inhibiting the emptying. It is inhibiting the emptying of the GI tract. What is its action on the pancreas? Cholecystokinin on the pancreas, it stimulates secretion. Now this secretion, how is it different from the secretin secretion? Remember, secretin secretion was bicarbonate rich. Here it is enzyme rich. All these are important MCQs. What increases enzyme rich secretion of the GI tract? It is the cholecystokinin. What increases the bicarbonate secretion of the pancreatic fluid? Secretin. What increases the enzymatic secretion of the pancreatic fluid? It is cholecystokinin. How does cholecystokinin get stimulated? By the presence of fat amino acids. Hence, a person with pancreatitis, we advise him not to take anything. A person who has got abnormal pancreas because of inflammation or infection, alcohol or something like that, we ask him not to take anything by mouth. The reason is we don't want the secretions of the pancreas to increase. Because what is the complication of pancreatitis? The pseudocyst. The pseudocyst, or collection of secretions in the form of pseudocyst, which causes maximum symptoms, GI symptoms like abdominal pain, vomitings, and these secretions are autolytic for the pancreas, causing necrotizing pancreatitis, and they also cause peritonitis. So hence, best treatment, that is the first step in the treatment of pancreatitis, is ask the patient to don't eat anything. Nil per oral. Don't eat anything, because acid in the stomach is secreting, resulting in secretion of secretin. Secretin causes increase in bicarbonate rich pancreatic juice. Similarly the enzyme rich secretions are stimulated by the presence of amino acids and fat in the duodenum, that is through the cholecystokinin. How does cholecystokinin act on? Is there any action of cholecystokinin on the gallbladder? It's a very, very important point. The name itself is saying cholecystokinin means what? It is stimulating the gallbladder to cause contraction of the gallbladder and relaxation of sphincter of Oddi. So on gallbladder, it has got two functions. It causes contraction of the gallbladder and it causes relaxation of the sphincters of Oddi. Sphincter of Oddi. It causes relaxation of the sphincter of Oddi. All right. Next important hormone. We are talking about endocrine control of the GI tract. Next important hormone is gastrin. Next important hormone is gastrin. All right, we'll discuss about gastrin. Now this gastrin is secreted from the G cells of stomach. Gastrin is also secreted by the antrum of the stomach. Gastrin also secreted by the duodenum. Hence, gastrinoma is a tumor of gastrin producing tumor. It can present in and around these areas, the antrum of the stomach, the G cells of the stomach, and the duodenum. All right. So G cells of stomach or the antrum or the duodenum secretes the gastrin. What is the stimulus of gastrin production in the stomach? Stimulus of gastrin production in the stomach is distension of stomach. Distension. In the antrum, it is the gastrin related peptides, that is the parasympathetic nervous system. Just now I told you in parasympathetic nervous system. What is the stimulus in parasympathetic nervous system? It is the GRP causes stimulation of gastrin, I told you. Is it not? It is causing stimulation of the gastrin where? In the antrum. In the antrum. Next, what causes the stimulation of gastrin in the duodenum? Actually, presence of acid from the stomach it inhibits the release of gastrin. Please remember this point. All right. So acid in the stomach inhibits, if you can remember this, acid from the stomach inhibits gastrin release in the duodenum. All right. What is the function of gastrin? It increases the GI motility. So what is the function? Wherever the gastrin is released, its function is to increase the motility and secretion of the GI tract. Secretion of the GI tract. All right. Next, the gastric inhibitor peptide and the glucagon-like peptide, both of these are released from the duodenum. So if you can see the two important hormones, if you can see all the hormones are secreted either from the stomach or the duodenum, maximum from the duodenum. So each and every hormone is from the duodenum except gastrin, which is released also from the G cells of the stomach. All right. G cells of the stomach, the duodenum. So what stimulates the release of gastric inhibitor peptide and glucagon-like peptide? It is the fats, presence of fats, presence of carbohydrates, presence of amino acids in the stomach causes a release of gastric inhibitor peptide and GLP. The name itself says that the GLP and the GIP causes inhibition. They inhibit the motility. They inhibit the GI motility. They inhibit the secretion, gastric inhibitor peptide or GI inhibitor peptide. The most important function of these on the pancreas. Hence, we are using these drugs to in diabetes. So, what is the role of GLP and GIP on the pancreas? What is the role of GLP and GIP in the pancreas? It increases the insulin. This you will have to remember it. It's a very, very important point. Increases insulin. If insulin is increased, what will happen to the blood glucose? Decreases. So somebody with diabetes, they need more insulin, is it not? So if you give these drugs, GIP like analogs or GLP analogs, gastric inhibitor peptides or GLP analogs, glucagon like peptide, hence we are calling it as glucagon. It decreases the glucagon. Hence used in the treatment of diabetes. Hence used in the treatment of diabetes. So this is all about the neuronal and endocrine control of the GI tract. Neuronal and the endocrine control of the GI tract. Alright. Next we'll discuss the motility. The motility of GI tract. Next we'll discuss the chapter of motility. The motility of the GI tract, it is a characteristic feature of the smooth muscles present in the GI tract. The smooth muscle, under its electrical activity, there is a resting membrane potential. Whenever this membrane potential is changed from minus 40 to minus 65, close to depolarization, there is stimulation of, there is beginning of the contraction. And what happens is, via the interstitial cells of Cajal, the interstitial cells of Cajal act as a pacemaker, hence they result in slow and rhythmic electrical rhythm. So pacemaker is also present in intestine apart from the heart. All right. So activity of the smooth muscle. First, we'll talk about the electrical activity of the smooth muscle. The electrical activity of the smooth muscle is brought about by the resting membrane potential. From minus 40, it reaches to minus 65 millivolts near to depolarization. What happens is, the interstitial cells of Cajal, please remember this, interstitial cells of Cajal, J is silent here. Interstitial cells of Cajal, they are acting as a pacemaker of the GI tract. Pacemakers of the GI tract. What will happen? Oscillation of the membrane potential is generated. Oscillation of membrane potential is generated by the interstitial cells of Cajal, and this results in slow and rhythmic electrical activity. Slow and rhythmic electrical activity. Slow and rhythmic electrical activity till the threshold is reached. Once the threshold is reached, it generates an action potential. All right, it generates a action potential, and this action potential is generated by the opening up of sodium and calcium channels. Entry of sodium and calcium results in the further increase in the positivity, and it causes contraction. The duodenum contracts very quickly like this. All right. So the action potential is generated and it results in electrical activity of the duodenum and most of the GI tract. Next, we'll talk about the motor activity. So once we have spoken about the electrical activity, now we'll talk about the motor activity. How is the motor activity brought about by? So motor activity is nothing but the contractile response. Motor activity is nothing but the contractile response. And contractile response is brought about by the stretch. So stretch induced contractile response. This stretch causes contraction. We all know this. Contraction. Stretch causes contraction. The gap junctions which are present, it creates the electrical syncytium within the smooth muscle. So the gap junctions, say suppose there are two intestinal cells. The gap junctions which are present, they create what is known as electrical syncytium. This results in slow waves which are created, result in low levels of contraction, and action potential is generated, and action potential causes strengthening of the contraction. The pacemaker activity from the interstitial cells of the Cajal, it acts as an intrinsic motor activity. Hence the GI tract always is in movement. Always, when you are sleeping, you hear some sounds in the GI tract. Those bowel sounds, the normal bowel sounds, it also affects the contraction of the sphincters which are acting as a valves. Right? Let us try to understand the swallowing now. Let us try to understand the swallowing reflex. What are the events that occur in the swallowing? What are the events that are occurring in the swallowing? First, there is relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter. Whenever you try to swallow, first what happens? Relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter. Upper esophageal sphincter is made of skeletal muscle. Alright? Here what happens is the primary peristaltic wave starts. So this is the first step, is the second step. Beginning of the primary peristaltic waves. Peristalsis or peristaltic wave. This results in relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. Lower esophageal sphincter is made up of smooth muscle. For smooth muscle, we need vasoactive intestinal peptides to act on, or nitric oxide mediated relaxation. So lower esophageal sphincter is a smooth muscle, upper esophageal sphincter is a skeletal muscle. Alright. Thus, the fourth step, that is relaxation of the stomach, occurs. Now this relaxation of stomach, most of the times it is a receptive relaxation, that is under reception, or just because it is ready to receive whatever is the content present in the lower esophageal sphincter, we call it receptive relaxation of the stomach. So these are the swallowing reflex. And how is the swallowing reflex controlled? The swallowing reflex is controlled by the brain stem. Please remember this fact. The brain stem controls the swallowing reflex. Brain stem, it is a matter of brain stem. Whereas the efferents are via the vagal nerves. The afferent is via the brainstem and the efferent is via the vagus. So upper esophageal sphincter, relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter is a skeletal muscle. Here it is purely a neurogenic reaction under the neurogenic control. Whereas the relaxation of lower esophageal sphincter, which is made up of smooth muscle, it is purely the myogenic response. Hence, there is a condition called as globus hystericus. Globus hystericus is a psychiatric condition. Globus hystericus, wherein the person has an abnormal sensation of, whenever a person tries to swallow, he will have abnormal sensation as if something is stucking in the throat without any reason. You do all the tests are normal, endoscopy, everything, CT scan, MRI, everything is normal. You are not able to define why this upper esophageal sphincter swallowing is difficulty. After that, you diagnose it as global hystericus because it is purely a neurogenic. Person with anxiety, psychiatric disorders, personality disorder, they develop globus hystericus. That is because of the constriction of the upper esophageal sphincter. Remember, the relaxation of the esophageal sphincter upper is under neurogenic control, whereas lower esophageal sphincter relaxation is purely myogenic smooth muscle control. Because of the relaxation is brought about by two things: vasoactive intestinal peptides and the nitric oxide. There is a condition called as achalasia cardia. In achalasia cardia, what happens? There is constriction of the lower esophageal sphincter. So what is the treatment of achalasia cardia? You give nitrates. Nitrates increase the nitric oxide, and thus they cause relaxation of the lower esophageal sphincter. We'll discuss this in medicine again. This is how physiology is helping in understanding medicine. Whenever a primary peristaltic wave is not successful, a secondary peristaltic wave is initiated. A secondary peristaltic wave is initiated by a local distension of the esophagus. The secondary wave is not under the conscious control, please remember. So primary peristaltic wave sometimes fails. If it fails, then a conscious secondary peristaltic wave is initiated. Alright. So that these are disorders of lower esophageal sphincter, achalasia, the disorder of lower esophageal sphincter which causes reflux of the acid into the stomach, from the stomach into the lower esophageal sphincter, lower esophagus. It damages the esophageal epithelium. It is gastroesophageal reflux disease. There is one more disorder called as nutcracker esophagus or diffuse esophageal spasm, wherein the spasm of the there is a complete spasm of the esophageal muscle. All these are because of neurogenic or myogenic disorders. We'll discuss all these disorders in medicine, right? So this is all about the swallowing followed by esophageal motility. Now what comes after esophagus? What comes after esophagus? Stomach. Then after stomach, small intestine. Then after small intestine, large intestine or colon. Then comes the defecation. So these are all the components that we'll be discussing very fast. So stomach motility, how does it start? What is the stimulus of stomach motility? Motility of the stomach is stimulated by acetylcholine. So acetylcholine parasympathetic response, it stimulates the stomach motility and also the local distension. Also the local distension. Right? What inhibits the stomach distension? What inhibits the stomach distension is inhibition of stomach motility. What inhibits the stomach is, you all know, that release of gastrin. So presence of acid in the stomach releases gastrin, is it not? This gastrin takes feedback from the duodenum. It releases CCK and secretin and gastric inhibitory peptides. All these inhibit the motility of the stomach. All right. All these inhibit the motility of the stomach. Hope you are understanding it. Now, how does the stomach emptying occurs? Stomach emptying is maximum with the help of whenever stomach is full of liquids. Maximum. Then carbohydrate emptying occurs first. Then the protein. Protein emptying is faster than the fat. So least to empty is fat and quickest to empty is the liquid. Hence, whenever you have a fatty meal, you feel like drinking a lot of water. Whenever you have a heavy meal, you feel like drinking a lot of water, so that this water causes stomach emptying and you do not feel any bloating sensation, or you do not feel all these effects. There is a pylorus. There is a area of stomach called as pylorus, and this pylorus is acting as a sphincter. This pyloric sphincter is under the control of the nervous system. A wave of contraction closes the sphincter so that only small volume of stomach content is moved into the duodenum. All right. Though you eat a lot, maybe you eat 3 or 4 or 5 burgers or pizzas, but these are not reaching the duodenum thanks to the sphincter of stomach called as the pylorus. This pylorus causes rhythmic contraction and relaxation. And it is under the influence of the CCK, it is under the influence of the GIP, it is under the influence of the secretin. All right. What all these cause? They increase the constriction of the sphincter. They increase the constriction of the GI sphincter. Hence, they slow the stomach emptying. Hence, they slow the stomach emptying. They slow the stomach emptying. Hope you have understood this. This is all about the motility of the stomach. Next, the motility of the small intestine. The small intestine is very, very special in its motility by the fact that the small intestine is having a ileocecal sphincter, it has got ileum distension, which is responsible for movement of the peristaltic wave, and it also controls the colon distension. How does this occur? All these are because of the rhythmic contractions that are occurring in the small intestine. These rhythmic contractions, they create small sections of contraction relaxation. Say suppose this is all the small intestine. So in this small intestine, this area is contracted and rest of the area is relaxed. So this area is relaxed. Again, this area is contracted and this area is relaxed. So there are segments of contraction and rhythmic segments of contraction and relaxation. Rhythmic areas of contraction and relaxation. These rhythmic areas of contraction and relaxation, so a wave of contraction preceded by relaxation, peristaltic or propulsive wave occurs. All right. They are acting on three areas: ileocecal sphincter, ileum, and hence the beginning part of the colon. And what is it happening is the ileocecal junction or ileocecal sphincter, it is exactly in between the small intestine and the large intestine, and it is kept closed. It is kept closed. The ileum, whenever it distenses, it creates a muscular wave, and the distension of ileum relaxes the sphincter. All right. The colon distension results in constriction of the sphincter. So the ileocecal junction is under the control of ileum and colon. Whenever ileum distension occurs, the sphincter relaxes, so that only forward movement of the contents occurs. There is no backward movement. All right. Whenever ileum distension occurs, it opens up the sphincter. Whenever colon distension occurs, the terminal part, colon distension occurs, it closes the backward sphincter. Hence, the ileocecal junction is maintained, and this is all about the motility of the small intestine. Now let us talk about the motility of the colon. Motility of the colon. Colon has got segmentations, and these segmentations, they undergo contractions and create what is known as haustration of the colon. These are nothing but segmented contractions. Segments of contraction segments of the colon are called as haustrations. In colon, what happens is there is movement of the product of colon in mass. There is mass movement, and this movement is brought about by the propulsive actions created by the peristaltic wave. Here the peristaltic wave is more prolonged than the small intestine. So we have got prolonged peristalsis. In small intestine it is rhythmic peristalsis. Here it is a prolonged peristalsis. Here it is prolonged peristalsis on the colon. Time has come, we need to understand about what is known as migratory motor complex. Migratory motor complex. What is migratory motor complex? Migratory motor complex nothing but is a propulsive movement which is initiated during the fasting. So whenever a person fasts, It is a propulsive movement in a fasting state. It begins in the stomach and moves the undigested material from the stomach into the small intestine and from there into the colon. So from the stomach to the small intestine to the colon. The movement of, there is nothing inside the stomach. Whatever is there, secretions and all, they move forward, first in the small intestine, then into the stomach, then into the colon. During fasting, what happens? The migratory motor complex repeats every 90 to 120 minutes. So it repeats every 90 to 120 minutes. It occurs in the cycles of 90 to 120 minutes. It occurs in a regular cycles of when one movement reaches the distal ileum. Say suppose from stomach one movement has started, it has reached the ileum, from ileum to colon. So the distal area one movement is, the new movement starts in the stomach. Slowly there is movement of undigested material from the stomach into the colon. It removes all the undigested material from so many days. If every day you are eating 3 times a day, 4 times a day, or even more sometimes, undigested material is there in the stomach, intestines. Everything is removed because of fasting. Hence, fasting is very, very helpful in cleaning of the GI tract. And it is said that once GI tract is cleaned, you are free of many diseases. All right. So now the Ramadan is fast approaching. So this in Ramadan, you should remember this point, that your GI tract is undergoing what is known as MMC, migratory motor complex. This migratory motor complex occurs in a cycle of 90 to 120 minutes. It removes the undigested material from the stomach and small intestine. It helps in reducing the bacterial migration from the colon into the small intestine. It also helps in reducing the bacterial migration from the colon into the small intestine, which occurs because of the incomplete emptying of the intestines. Right? Next, last is a defecation. Defecation reflux, please remember, it's a voluntary reflux under the control of the sphincter. So we'll try to understand what is defecation now. So defecation reflex, it involves the central nervous system. It is under the control of the central nervous system. There is a mass movement occurring in the terminal colon, which fills up the rectum. So what is the stimulus of defecation? Filling up of rectum. Filling up of rectum. Whenever rectum undergoes loading, it causes relaxation of the internal anal sphincter. It causes relaxation of the internal anal sphincter. It causes relaxation of the internal anal sphincter. This relaxation of the internal anal sphincter causes contraction of the external anal sphincter. Now voluntarily you start searching for a washroom, and once you find a washroom, nice place, you go and sit there. You are ready. Your brain should understand that this is the right place to empty your stools or defecation. Then there is a relaxation of the external anal sphincter. So external anal sphincter relaxation, please remember, it's a voluntary, under the voluntary control. It is under the voluntary control. It occurs only whenever there is you find the right place, and this is under the influence of your cerebral cortex. So whenever relaxation of the whenever relaxation of the external anal sphincter occurs, this relaxation of external anal sphincter, if at all it occurs because of the propulsive action, propulsive contraction of the distal colon, terminal colon, distal colon, and it results in complete defecation. Sometimes what happens is there is problem in the innervation of the external sphincter. This causes incontinence or involuntary defecation. Whenever rectum fills, suddenly, as occurs in case of stroke, whenever your cerebral cortex is not functioning properly, there is an infarct in the cerebral cortex in an area of sphincter control, the medial aspect of the cortex. What happens is it results in incontinence. This we'll read in central nervous system chapter. So hope I have completed the first part of GI tract now. In the next class, I'll discuss the second chapter, that is secretions of the GI tract. Secretions of the GI tract are very, very important. We'll start our discussion with salivary secretion, then we'll talk about gastric secretion, then the duodenal secretion, then the pancreatic secretion, then the gallbladder secretions, then the small intestine secretions, then the colon. All these we'll talk about, and in the end, the last chapter that we'll be discussing is digestion absorption. Hope you have understood this. Any doubt, you can just simply ask me, and I'll try to rectify it. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.